Mercedes is winning with terrifying ease, while Red Bull, the team that dominated 4 straight titles, sits 9th in the standings. This is not a normal season. 11 days before the Miami Grand Prix, the FIA rewrote the 2026 regulations in a secret emergency meeting. Every team principal and power unit chief agreed to changes that took effect immediately. This was not planned development. This was panic. At the center of this storm is Kimi Antonelli, a 19-year-old rookie who now leads the World Championship. The cars he drives were meant to be the future. Smaller, lighter, powered by a massive 350 kilowatts electrical surge. Instead, they have become unpredictable. Drivers report losing feeling in their hands. A crash in Japan registered 50 G of impact. The data tells a completely different story than the official statements. What no broadcast covered is this. The FIA's emergency fixes arrived too late for some, and perhaps just in time for others. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Did these changes truly solve the safety crisis? Or did they simply cover a symptom while one team exploits a hidden advantage? The answer lies in the next section, where we break down the system failure that forced the FIA to act. Oliver Bearman walked away from a 50 G impact at Suzuka, but his first radio message was not about his own safety. He asked why he had no warning that the car ahead was slowing. Franco Colapinto's Haas was harvesting energy, a process called superclipping. But there was no signal, no light, no way for Bearman to know. This was not a driver error. This was a system designed without a critical piece of information. And that missing piece changed everything. The new 2026 rules allow cars to deploy or harvest up to 350 kilowatts of electrical power, creating speed differences of 50 kilometers per hour on a straight with no visible cue. Oscar Piastri raised the same concern within hours. Drivers behind cannot see the energy state of the car ahead, turning every straight into a potential blind spot. The FIA's own analysis confirmed the risk. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. This interface failure was predictable, and it took a near career-ending crash to force action. The emergency meeting on April 20th produced 6 regulation changes, including mandatory rear warning lights for energy states. But the real question is why it took 3 races and a 50 G impact to act. What no broadcast covered is this. The same lack of visibility that caused Bearman's crash may be hiding other dangers in the new cars. And that leads us to a different kind of invisible threat, one that is draining drivers of sensation, not just seconds. Fernando Alonso pulled his Aston Martin into the garage in China because he could no longer feel the pedals. This was not fatigue. This was the Honda power unit sending violent vibrations through the chassis, numbing his hands and feet after just 25 laps. Lance Stroll reported the same sensation after 15. The AMR 26, Adrian Newey's first design for the team, has completed only 62% of possible race distance. 0 points, 3 races. And a question that no team wants to answer aloud. What no broadcast covered is this. The vibration issue is not just a comfort problem. It is a safety crisis that compromises a driver's ability to control the car at 300 kilometers per hour. Adrian Newey, the most celebrated designer in the sport, watched his creation become a physical hazard. The ADU parity check, a mechanism to help struggling manufacturers, was delayed from Miami to Monaco due to canceled races. Mercedes has publicly opposed emergency upgrades for teams that made poor technical bets. Aston Martin is stranded with a car that hurts its drivers, and a partnership that may not survive the season. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. If a driver cannot feel the car, no regulation change can fix the risk. Miami becomes the ultimate test for Aston Martin. A double finish might stabilize the project. Another retirement could force a fundamental re-evaluation of the Honda collaboration. And while Aston fights a physical battle, another team is fighting a different kind of war, one measured not in vibrations, but in thousandths of a second, and a hidden advantage that vanishes after this weekend. George Russell's dominance in Australia was not just about driver skill. Mercedes found a way to extract more power from the 2026 engine regulations, while other teams played by the spirit of the rules. The FIA measures compression ratios when the engine is cold at room temperature. But engines do not race at room temperature. They race at 130 degrees Celsius. And metal expands when it gets hot. This is the part that changes everything. Mercedes engineers discovered that building certain components with precise tolerances keeps the compression ratio within the 16:1 limit during cold tests. But when the engine reaches operating temperature, the effective ratio climbs closer to 18:1. The estimated advantage is 15 PS, worth about 3/10 per lap in Melbourne. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda protested in February. The FIA voted to close the loophole, but the new measurement rule does not start until June 1st, the Monaco Grand Prix. Miami is the last chance for Mercedes to exploit this edge. George Russell and the team know this window is closing. They must build a points buffer in Miami, or watch their lead evaporate when the rules change. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. If Mercedes is winning with a loophole, why did every other team agree to the April emergency meeting? The answer reveals a deeper crisis, one that has turned the sport's most successful dynasty into an afterthought. And that story begins with a question nobody expected to ask this season. Max Verstappen sits ninth in the championship standings, a staggering fall for a four-time world champion. The Red Bull RB22, once the benchmark of the grid, now struggles with basic reliability. The team that won 4 consecutive titles is tied with Alpine on just 16 points. This is not a slump, this is a structural collapse. What no broadcast covered is this. The exodus of key personnel has left a technical void that no amount of budget can fill. Gianpiero Lambius, Verstappen's longtime race engineer, moved to McLaren. Adrian Newey, the architect of Red Bull's dominance, departed for Aston Martin. Christian Horner was dismissed in July 2025, and Helmut Marko no longer holds influence. Laurent Mies, the new team principal, has openly admitted the car has major weaknesses. Meanwhile, Red Bull Powertrain's first in-house engine with Ford partnership trails Mercedes and Ferrari in performance. Verstappen has called the car undrivable. The data shows a deficit of over half a second per lap in race trim. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. When a dynasty crumbles this fast, the problem is never just one thing. It is leadership, technology, and morale, all failing at once. And while Red Bull searches for answers, a 19-year-old rookie is rewriting the record books with a car that simply works. The contrast could not be sharper, and it leads directly to the most unexpected story of the 2026 season. Kimi Antonelli, a 19-year-old rookie, leads the Formula One World Championship by 72 points after just 3 races. He is the youngest pole sitter and the youngest championship leader in the sport's history. This is not a fluke. This is a signal that the new era rewards a different kind of driver, one who can master electrical energy management while veterans struggle to adapt. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Antonelli's McLaren MCL39 has turned its early season failures into dominance through superior electrical integration. While other teams battled reliability issues, McLaren optimized the 350 kilowatts MGUK deployment, giving Antonelli consistent power delivery when it mattered most. His wins in China and Japan came from pole position, converting 100% of his front row starts into victories. Oscar Piastri, his experienced teammate, has recovered from early DNFs to support the championship push with strategic consistency. The Italian rookie now carries the weight of national expectation, the first driver from Italy to lead the standings in decades. But here is what the paddock is not talking about. Antonelli's lead is built on a car that works, not just a driver who is fast. When the regulations change again in Miami, will his advantage hold? The next section reveals how 6 emergency regulation changes could reshape the entire championship battle, and why Antonelli's rookie season might face its toughest test yet. The Miami International Autodrome becomes the proving ground for 6 emergency regulation changes enacted just 11 days before the race. Qualifying energy drops from 8 megajoules to 7 megajoules per lap, forcing drivers to commit to flat-out runs instead of lifting to save power. Superclipping power jumps to 350 kilowatts, slashing charging time from 10 seconds to under 4 seconds, so cars no longer crawl visibly on straights. Boost mode is now capped at plus 150 kilowatts to prevent dangerous speed deltas during wheel-to-wheel combat. This is the part that changes everything. The MG UK now delivers full power only in marked acceleration zones, not everywhere on track. An automatic start system prevents stalls and slow launches that caused gridside incidents. Mandatory rear warning lights finally give drivers a visual cue when the car ahead is harvesting or deploying energy, solving the blind spot that led to Bearman's crash. But Miami's track temperature of 38 degrees Celsius stresses electrical systems already running at their limit. The sprint format allows only 60 minutes of practice to learn all these changes. What no broadcast covered is this. The FIA's internal simulation predicts a net gain of just 0.1 seconds per lap from these changes, a margin too small to see on television. But if the new rules fail under race conditions, the consequence is not just a chaotic Miami Grand Prix. It is a loss of confidence in the entire 2026 technical direction. And that is where this story gets complicated. The next section reveals what happens if Miami exposes flaws that no regulation change can fix before the championship battle moves to Monaco. Kimi Antonelli holds the championship lead as Miami becomes the most scrutinized weekend in recent Formula One history. The Apple TV exclusive deal worth $140 million per year launches here, alongside IMAX cinema broadcasts priced at $30 per ticket. 26.6 million viewers watched the last Miami sprint. This weekend demands spectacle, not energy management games. The FIA's emergency changes must deliver visible racing or face a credibility crisis that extends far beyond the track. But the pressure is not just commercial. The championship itself hangs in the balance, and every decision made in Miami will echo through the rest of the season. The championship stands at a fork. If Kimi Antonelli wins again, Mercedes builds an unassailable lead before their thermal advantage disappears in Monaco. If McLaren or Red Bull recover, the new regulations level the field and the title fight reignites. If crashes continue despite warning lights and energy caps, the FIA faces urgent questions about the 2026 direction. The data from Miami will determine whether the April meeting fixed the problem or merely delayed a larger reckoning. What no broadcast covered is this. The real test is not speed, but whether drivers can finally race without fear of invisible slowdowns. The open loop from the start of this story now has its answer. The FIA patched the symptoms, but the root causes remain. Mercedes races against a clock. Aston Martin fights for survival, and a 19-year-old rookie holds the championship in his hands. Miami is the referendum on whether Formula One's 2026 revolution is a masterpiece or a mistake. The warning lights, the energy caps, the zone deployment, all of it converges on this single weekend. And when the checkered flag falls, we will know if the sport saved its future or simply bought time. The world is watching.